became and continued to be board member and sponsor of STIC. As you heard in some of the presentations last night, they are doing Smalltalk since ever. I got the first demo of Gemstone at the first USNA in 1986, where we met and many others. And just by preparing the lightning talk for tonight about the analyst, I opened the last production versions we were using in-house. And what did I find? An advertisement, a draft for an advertisement our organization did for Gemstone for All. That was about the time our next speaker joined the Gemstone company. And welcome with me, Ware, back into this technology. And I've gone through this a couple of times also in our organization, that people are getting back to a Smalltalk. And the reason why, they're addicted. They went out to the world, and after they've seen all the other stuff, they said, no, let's go back home. Welcome home.
I never really did leave Gemstone. I'm very happy to be back. I'm wearing my Smalltalk pin with great pride today. Evelyn, I want to thank her. It's really quite an honor to be in this conference and seeing some of the names that I've seen coming up in my career in Smalltalk. And it really is, I'm a relative rookie at 20 years in this business, having interviewed in 1993 to join Gemstone. And I have a few stories about that, some that you may not have heard yet. Putra Samporna was the owner back then, and I was interviewing to be the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Operations. Gemstone was a great lab from 1982 to about 93, had a couple of customers, TI, Florida Power and Light. And I was interviewing for the company, having come from Unisys Corporation and Mentor Graphics and Electronic Design, also with Logic Modeling. I was part of the Oregon Silicon Forest group, and Logic Modeling had been acquired by Synopsys out of the Bay Area, and I decided to stay in Oregon and raise my family, so I was looking at Gemstone. And I went down to visit them, studied them up a lot. This object technology looked very interesting. Early days of Smalltalk, I thought it was very intriguing. Studied the company and saw this powerful engineering team, extremely powerful. I took a hard look at that team because I knew the technology was critical to any success, but they're missing three critical components. And I went down to visit the gentleman in San Francisco, and he said, well, what are we missing? I said, well, you've got a 4-cylinder car here with one excellent cylinder firing, but you're missing sales, marketing, and consulting services. You're missing the other 3 cylinders to build a company. And he said, well, what should we do? And I said, well, if you give me $10 million, we'll build the other cylinders out, and if we don't double revenues every year, you have my resignation. Is that a deal? He said, it's a deal. So in 1994, we went from $2 million to 2,000 to 24 million, doubled revenues every year, and sold it to a bunch of drunken sailors called Brocat Systems for 12 times revenue for $285 million, which spoke to the value. But at that time, some of you may recall, we were in the early days of app servers, and there was all this acquisition going on around us with Net Dynamics and Kiva. Sun was acquiring, BEA was moving up. You had IBM's platform, and the Gemstone had built 2 platforms, one in Smalltalk and one in Java. And the folks at Brocat, who also acquired Blaze software in a 3-way deal, created $1 billion investment and about $400 million in revenue with 1,200 employees. Well, They made a couple of tactical errors, like getting German bondholders involved in the company in the early days. And when the market shut down, Brocat was forced to divest its acquisitions. And so their stock went from $120 to $1 in about 17 months. They wanted to basically kill it. I raised my hand with two partners, led a management buyout, bought it back right there in May of 2000. We had 285 employees at our max. We, at time of the acquisition back, had 90. So we wanted to save that core engineering team, that critical team that we'd always had and needed. So we bought it back and built it again. And this time we not only continued in the small talk vein, partnering with the big shipping companies and the big banks and utilities to build 64-bit small talk, but also built a product for the new markets in distributed caching called Gemfire. And that was our Java distributed caching technology. We had this intellectual property that was fantastic. And you can see here this pattern of Gemstone with very, very strong technology. Gemfire went to the markets, competed with Tangasol and Gigaspaces, and VMware loved that. They bought that. They bought that for 7 times revenue, strategic acquisition in 2010. They valued the small talk piece as well. They valued the customers, the joint partners, joint synergies, and I ran that group for them for 2 years. The VMware company is like life on an aircraft carrier. So there's a lot going on. And for our little America's Cup vessel, you know, to onboard a vessel like that onto an aircraft carrier can be challenging. And of that, you know, in a typical year, VMware, Oracle, or IBM will acquire 15 to 20 companies. So you're onboarding, you can envision kind of in your mind onboarding all these craft onto these aircraft carriers. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of the management teams and the sales strategies and the product strategies and the onboarding and synthesization of these new technologies. And it doesn't always work the way you planned it to work. But one thing I can tell you is this team we kept together during all of that, and they continue to thrive. And this team here basically holds 9 patents. And we have much more intellectual property and many, many trademarks that have come out of this team. You know, we take great pride in these guys with these patents. I think that combined team there has 150 years of small talk experience. So Gemstone has been a jewel for many, many years. And one thing that I'd like to emphasize is that Gemstone is growing. And we see a lot of growth, and I will present that to you here in a little bit. VMware is a good company. There's no malice to VMware. This is a friendly divestiture. I raised my hand because they didn't see this particular business unit as strategic. They were going down the big data, Hadoop space, cloud, real strong in that area. If you looked at VMware in the last year, they announced this pivotal initiative where they spun out all of the software assets of VMware into Pivotal with Paul Moritz, formerly Microsoft, heading that up. And VMware kept its core virtualization technology under Carl Eschenbach, and you had the Pivotal and then the basic new initiative companies put off to the side to some degree. So EMC, of course, plays into that in a big way as well. And so they contributed Greenplum assets, and Pivotal puts into Gemfire and a bunch of other assets that go after this big data. Well, so I kept in touch with the COO there, Todd Nielsen. I want to keep my eye on our team, make sure they're taken care of. And at one point he said, you know, this part of the company we're not spending enough focus on. And, you know, you've been the steward of it. Would you like that piece back? And I said, absolutely. We'd like that back. Because we needed to protect that and these customers. So what's not known to many people is that we run 20% of the world's shipping container business. And what was OCL, these companies run their entire company in Gemstone, 64-bit Smalltalk. These are billion-dollar shipping companies that run a good deal of all of their logistics. We track every container by content, by RFID, by profit, by port, 90 days sooner than any competitor. It's been rated #1 system for the Smithsonian Institution. It is the FedEx of the shipping business. Gemstone S powers all of that with a database in 64-bit that can't be touched by Oracle or DB2. That's why we have power in this business. When we run a company like that, you get to the corner office. You're not in IT as much, because we're making them billions of dollars in profit. Well, interesting story here. OCL started that for us, and then when Hong Kong was given back to the Chinese, the CEO of OCL became the governor of Hong Kong. And we then sold that with him to the Chinese, the China Ocean Shipping Company, COSCO. And then I worked that in Asia for a couple of years. I saw this huge opportunity in the shipping vertical. And then 3 years later, we sold it again through OCL. They're selling this killer app for over $100 million. And Gemstone receives about $15 million every time that happens, plus long-term maintenance contracts. We service it with our great engineers and keep it at 724 production. Well, then they sold it to the Japanese, the largest Japanese carrier, the Nippon Yusen Keisha line in Tokyo. So now we have 20% of the world's shipping containers. And I can tell you, we're growing. This company is not standing still. We're going to pick up another 1 or 2 of these big shipping companies in the next decade. And we have growth. I'm going to be over in Hong Kong and Shanghai with Norm here in July. We're talking to the Chinese about setting up an ASP using this killer app to service the low end of the shipping business from carriers from 0 up to about 50 on the planet. That could create a huge ASP potential for us and growing Smalltalk in the world. That's the way we grow Smalltalk. We're not doing it through traditional starts, in engineering starts. We're doing it through the universities and through our partners. That's how we will grow this business in a meaningful way. We also run some big financial institutions. And these are institutions, JP Morgan, that runs a $3 billion per year profit exotic derivatives platform on Gemstone Smalltalk. Okay? This is a big application. This application cannot go down. We're doing exotic derivatives with probably 300 quants on daily algorithmic changes for exotic derivatives. Okay? Cannot go down. UBS runs all of their semi-precious metals and trading systems on the planet, 4 billion a day in trading volume on Gemstone 64. ICE is the largest electronic platform on the planet for Brent crude and oil. They took all of Enron's business when they went bankrupt. You Google ICE, you will see a powerful electronic trading system running on 64-bit Gemstone. They're running other components with, it's a broad platform in their case, and they have other systems in Java and some relational. It's a big company. But we do a lot of the trades in millisecond, microsecond speeds on the trading platform that they need in real time. So we're in the financial and trading vertical. We run these desks at JP Morgan. These systems are billions of dollars in profit for these companies, okay? They just converted to 64-bit. Well, this summer they're converting to 64-bit. JP Morgan has been one of the last holdouts. So we will see growth also in the 32 to 64-bit conversions for all our customers. And we have at least 30 more to do. And some big ones like Texas Instruments and Florida Power and Light. These big 32 to 64 conversions are game changers for these companies. And it keeps Oracle and IBM out of those shops that can't compete. It would be an order of magnitude or 2 more expensive to do it in a relational system. You should all know that better than anybody when we have a pure object model, and if it's designed properly. In this case, it has been. Our team with Norm has created these systems, done these reference architectures, done the tuning, done the performance enhancements. We continue to upgrade to 64-bit, and we'll continue to innovate in the years ahead. Absolutely innovate in that area. We have a strong manufacturing base. Texas Instruments runs 8 wafer fabs around the world using our technology in clean rooms. We run 8 fabs that can only go down 30 minutes a year at Christmas, and that is it. for maintenance upgrades. Every minute they're down costs $30,000 in profit. So it cannot go down. It's called the work system. Does all the process, yield, and silicon works for TI's fabs. All on Gemstone 32-bit. There's our second and large 64-bit upgrade that's going to come down in the next few years. Utilities, many of you have heard Florida Power and Light. Beautiful system. Also the last of the 32-bit holdouts. We're talking to them now about 64-bit. They do all the trouble call management for hurricanes for Florida. So the beautiful story here is and these are systems that have been designed by a number of engineers, even in this room. Martin Kraft back there was, I think, involved in some of this as well. A lot of the guys at NYK have been involved. When Katrina hit, IBM and Oracle crashed. They could not handle the volume. They could not handle the trouble calls coming in from thousands and thousands of utility customers. The Gemstone app stood up, never went down, was given a grade A rating by the CIO, Florida Power and Light. That's how we stay in these companies. Very, very powerful app, and we're going to convert that to 64-bit. We will outsource that. We'll take it on as a company. Another thing VMware ignored in our business was professional services. We're going to rebuild that business to $1, $2, $3 million a year with these large customers. They will gladly pay for conversion, tuning, performance, and reference architectures. And they love talking to our patent holding engineers. And then finally, we have a telecom vertical. Some people don't know that Siemens has selected us in Vienna to run the next generation of inventory and cable management systems globally. And I think you all recognize that name. That's going to get big. That is a growth opportunity for us. And that will happen through a value-added reseller channel. Telecom Argentina, I was just there last year. It's a great bed of small talk. The FAST conference down there in Buenos Aires. Met the CIO of Telecom Argentina, gave us an order for $1 million, converting to 64-bit for his app in telecom. And he's following Siemens' lead. Huge growth opportunity for Gemstone, Gemtalk. By the way, the name Gemtalk. So when we bought it back from VMware, we couldn't use Gemstone because it was tied too closely to Gemfire. And that brand had gone out with all the documentation all over the world of VMware, electronic media, and it just wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to pull all that back. It cost them tens of millions of dollars. So they said, sorry, you can't use the name Gemstone. So I designed Gemtalk, which is Gemstone and Smalltalk. Decided to take the power of Gem from our history and the beauty of Smalltalk and combine it to create Gemtalk. So we do all of this telecom work and provisioning, and these are finally the last vertical that we strive to succeed in is intelligence. I was involved in having had a top secret clearance at NSA in my earlier years. Norm has a clearance at the CSA that we periodically dust off, but they're not current, but we have access and have had access to intelligence agencies. And we've used Gemstone 64-bit to do signals and electronic intelligence and look for bad guys really fast. And we put in clear consultants in there to help them do that. We're giving them more than Google-like power to look for bad guys and do data correlation in millisecond speeds. And that's important to those people. We've just received another commitment from the Canadian Border Security Agency for all the passport control for all of Canada. And we're going to upgrade that and deploy that on Gemstone 64-bit in concert with our GSA Partners Act and ITEX in Canada. And that also will service the securities establishment and the correction service. We run all of the yield crop analysis for the country of Norway. Does all, or the Dutch agriculture, excuse me. Norway does the passport control as well. So in Holland, we've been there to visit them, and they just marvel at the power of 64-bit to do yield analysis on all crops developed, built, and deployed and sold in the country of Holland. So the Canadian government likes us. Can't do without our partners. I'm looking forward to re-engaging with Syncom, Instantiations, others here on this list that we value. We're building new partnerships, and I think, again, I see the value of expanding the business through our channels, our channel partners. So in our world, we will see that growth coming. So people that say this business is on a slow decline don't understand the business. People that look at it closely see 5 very obvious avenues for growth. You have all the expansion with these big customers that are growing their applications. You have the 32 to 64-bit conversion opportunities with all of these people. You have these ASP potential that we're setting up across the world, not just in Smalltalk, but in Ruby. You know, we're going to make Ruby scale. Maglev is our way to do that. We may set up ASPs and future technologies in Maglev and Ruby that take this out and use the power of the 64-bit underpinning and the C primitives. People don't need to know what it's written in. We're just going to send out some powerful technology on the front end for people to build new apps and attack those new developers in Ruby. We grow through the channel, of course, and we grow through joint ventures. I'm going to be involved and set up some joint ventures with companies around the world to expand the use of the branch of the tree of 64-bit Smalltalk, which I believe is the best on the planet. So that's our summary. We got a great team. We've got excellent opportunities ahead. And we, I'm telling you, are here to stay and flourish. Thank you.
I'm Norm Green. I'm the CTO of Gemtalk. I'm going to talk a bit about the product roadmap and where we're going with Gemstone technologies. So first, just a few things about the transition. A lot of people have asked me about this week, kind of what's really going to change, what's not going to change. We are Gemstone becoming Gemtalk. We're actually moving offices. That's in progress as we speak. We're going upstairs from VMware in the same building, so we can just go downstairs and knock on the door if we forget something. We do have a new top-level domain, gemtalksystems.com. The VMware addresses work, and they will work for a while. As we transition those, the format's pretty simple, first.last at Gemtalk. Our phone numbers will change. And we're going to be doing some more flexible licensing options going forward. I'll talk more about that later. But a lot of things are not changing as well. As Dan mentioned, the company name is changing to Gemtalk, but the product names are not. We retain the rights to those. So Gemstone S, GemBuilder for Smalltalk, etc. That's all going to stay the same. The team is not changing. 100% staff retention. Everybody that was working on Gemstone S and Gemstone for VMware is now doing so for Gemtalk. So everybody came over. The support and licensing terms don't change, at least not from day one. We've picked up all the contracts and maintenance agreements that VMware had. They've all been transferred to us. So there's really no change there for customers. Our tech support is not changing. We're using the same site, Zendesk. To manage our support. There may be a URL change coming up soon to get there, but the underlying system and everything is going to remain the same. And our participation in the Smalltalk community is not going to change at all. We're still planning on coming to the conferences, starting with this one, ESUG and FAST. You'll see the usual suspects at those conferences, and our support for the industry, the sponsorship of STIC, and the Faro Consortium, those things that we do, we're planning to keep on doing. So some things change, some things don't. To go through our products now, the Gemstone 32-bit product, VMware had announced that was end of lifing in 2015. We're pulling that back at this time because we have some major customers, as Dan mentioned, that need more time to transition. So there's no fixed end of life date anymore for Gemstone 32. However, with that said, most of our resources and engineers are working on Gemstone 64. So it is in a stable maintenance mode, I guess is the way to put it. We are doing releases on it kind of as needed for our customers, but we're not spending a lot of time on the older 32-bit version. But we're also not going to pull the plug on it at any fixed time right now. So that's one change here that we are making. The end of life is suspended indefinitely on this product. Gemstone 64 version 2 is what the majority of our customers are running on right now. We've been on version 3 now for a couple of years, so this is also in kind of a stable maintenance mode. It's what most of our customers are running, like I said. Our current version is 2453. We've been doing some scalability performance enhancements for some of our larger customers when they want to run the entire repository in memory. Think of a terabyte of shared cache kind of thing. There's some internal things that work a bit differently when you do that versus going to disk for objects. So we've done some things there to enhance some of the low-level things, especially on AIX. But we're not doing a lot of work here in 2X much anymore. Mostly urgent bug fixes and keeping current with the performance, or the operating systems rather, while people move forward to version 3, which we hope is going to happen in the near future. Current version in version 3 is 3103. That was a bug fix release. It came out actually in the last few weeks. Highlights of that were some fixes with the networking stuff. There's some glitches with IPv6 support that we've ironed out. Hot standby fixes. That's the ability to have one or more hot standby databases that are updated continuously from a master. Kind of what Oracle calls clustering. Also some pretty low-level fixes in the process scheduler, and that's the way the Gemstone 64 does green threads. To be able to fork processes and so on. We found a couple of corner cases there that weren't quite right. So this is our current 3.1 release. 3.2 release was originally scheduled for August, and with the transition to Gemtalk, we're moving that forward to December. Just because there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Our server lab is going to be moving from the VMware Wenatchee data center down to a Beaverton data center. Dan's actually renting a U-Haul truck to drive up I-5 to go get the servers in a few weeks on a road trip. I'm not going to be there for that, thankfully. But we're moving the entire infrastructure from Washington to Beaverton, and we have to get everything hooked up. And there's some of our infrastructure that comes with us from VMware. They've been very generous in giving us things we need, but there's some other things that are shared with the Gemfire guys in the office that we can't have, so we've been off speccing that out, and kind of the good news is we get to build it the way we want to build it, mostly on Linux. But the bad news is we're doing some things from scratch, and there will be glitches. You know, all of our source code repositories have to be moved, and the devil is in the details. There's a million small things. So this is going to cost us probably several weeks of productivity while we get this sorted out. Anyway, that's the long story and why we're moving our 3.2 date. Pretty confident we can do it by December, though. Most of the engineering is done. A lot of the testing is not done, and that can be important. So highlights of what's coming in 3.2. Adding support for Solaris 11, that's the major OS upgrade we're supporting. We're updating our versions to the current stable releases of the third-party products that we add on. The list is here: OpenLDAP, OpenSSL, zlib, libicu, which is a Unicode package, and the regex package. Some new features in 3.2. We are multi-threading a bunch of things that used to be single-threaded. You've seen this trend probably the last several 3X releases. We're trying to parallelize and make things faster for the really large multi-billion object databases that some of our customers are running. The page reclaim sessions will be multi-threaded in 3.2, which will make for faster dead object and shadow page reclaims. There's going to be some new multi-threaded GC options, Some Unicode features, we're continuing to flesh that out to support UTF-8, UTF-16. We are doing away with the old character table support. There used to be a binary file you could load if you wanted an alternative character table into Gemstone, and we're integrating that into the ICU open source package, make that a little more friendly. We're also going to be offering some specialized collection subclasses optimized for some of the different character sets rather than just ASCII, dictionary and sort collection subclasses. 3.2, we're getting back to the indexing system, which is kind of not seen any improvements for a few years. I asked Dale to kind of put his glass stuff aside a little bit and come back to his other thing he takes care of, the indexing system, and see what we can do there to dust off some of the features we used to have in 32-bit, as well as try to move forward in some of this functionality. So he's come back actually with quite a detailed spec on things that we want to do in this area and enhancements we can make, and improvements for querying on very large index collections. There's going to be a brand new query API that we're not quite ready to talk about yet, but it's coming soon, to be able to do new and different queries on large collections that we couldn't do before, as well as more parallelization and multi-threading as well, things like concurrent index creation on collections. If you have a collection with 10 indexes, today you have to build those one at a time. Each one doesn't pass over the millions of elements. It can take some time to do that, even if it's in memory. So we're looking to parallelize that, as well as some examples and extensive examples on how to do things like wildcard string searches. It turns out you can do that today with the indexing system that we have, but it's not intuitively obvious how to do that a lot of times. You know, to do wildcard searches on string keys and so on. So we're going to put together an extensive set of Smalltalk examples on how to make that happen and what can be done. Something we get asked quite a bit, actually. Also something called set value path terms, the top item here. What that really is building an index on a collection within a collection. So think about employee.children, and children might be, you know, a collection of children that you might want to query on. So you have a collection along the index query path that you're interested in. You could do that in 32-bit, although it was fairly buggy, didn't always work right. That's something that we've been asked for time and again, to be able to have collections along the query path. We're going to add that back into 3.2 and improve it and get it working correctly. We're continuing to add encryption functionality to the product as well. We have the full OpenSSL shared libraries loaded into the product as of 3.1, so the API is all there. If you've ever looked at OpenSSL, there's well over 100 API calls into that library. There's everything under the sun in there you could want. The question is, how do you expose it, and what's the most useful of those 100? What we decided to do for 3.2 is expose the AES encryption and decryption protocols to be able to do that on character collections. We did a look at all the different ones in there, and it seems like AES is the most current and most secure and most widely used for a lot of areas, so that we chose to do that one, although there's many more in there. So be able to do encryption and decryption with a key and a salt on an arbitrary string and decrypt it back. Smalltalk example here how to do that, but there's a whole bunch of methods we have in here to do that on mostly strings and byte arrays, I think. Some new hot standby features as well. We're fleshing that out. We've got a few customers using that already. We've learned a lot from that. One thing that's been asked for is to be able to have a hot standby over a WAN. So when you're sending your updates to your standby repository, maybe have that encrypted in case you want to go over the internet or something for that. There could be performance challenges with that, but since we have OpenSSL in the product anyway, in 3.2 we're going to optionally offer to have that channel going over an SSL socket to the standby database to compress and encrypt everything. So if you have to go over the open internet to update a database on the other side of the country, you can do that and everything will be encrypted. We're also implementing a thread-safe GCI. I'm not sure how far we'll get with that for 3.2, but we're at least going to start on it. You'll be able to pass a session ID into the standard GCI calls and have the GCI be thread safe within itself. That's been a long time coming. The existing GCI will remain, so your applications that are using the GCI at all, if you have any, won't break. But going forward, we want to make that thread safe. We're also looking at adding some rudimentary protection for denial of service attacks on some of the Gemstone processes that might sit out in front of or very close to the firewall, such as the net of the eye and the stone and the monitor. Things that monitor traffic on public sockets could be subject to DOS attacks. It's been pointed out to us. So there's some things we can do there to minimize that a bit. Also spent some time recently working on VSD. This is a graphical analysis tool for looking at statistics in Gemstone. It's been around a long time. Started out as a skunkworks project by an engineer named Daryl Schneider back in the 90s. It's written in Tickle. 5 or 6 different open source packages, many of which are obsolete, and the authors have disappeared off the face of the earth. You know, their last SourceForge post was, you know, sometime in the 90s. But we've dusted this off and got it working in 64-bit mode. Previously, if you had some very large stat monitor files that you wanted to load and you went above the 4 gigabyte address space limit, it would crash. And there are some customers that do that. You know, when you sample 2,000 sessions every second for any amount of time, the files, even compressed, get pretty big pretty fast. Also went back and updated some of the packages you use, like Tickle, to more recent versions and so on, so we've got some more modern interactions with it. The one big request for us was getting the mouse wheel working, so you can scroll up and down these sessions without, you know, clicking on the tab, the scroll bar. So we've managed to get that working recently as well. So you'll see this coming out in 3.2. VSD is generic. It works with any version of Gemstone, so we may put this out earlier just as a download for people to try and kick the tires with it, since you could use 3.2 version with the current version of Gemstone you have. Got a couple of requests for that already, actually. The look and feel is the same. We haven't done very much there except add the session ID column in the middle there for sorting on session ID. But we're dusting this off. We're going to support it better than we have in the past under Gemtalk, as it's a critical tool for most of our Gemstone customers, and we want to support it. Just to review our platforms and licensing real briefly, the object server, the database part, runs on various Unix flavors, Linux, Apple, 2 kinds of Solaris on Spark and x86 and AIX. The clients also work on some of these platforms as well as Windows. For 3.2, we'll be supporting the latest VisualWorks and Visual Age plus 1 version back. That's kind of our tradition, so I think that'll be 7.9.1 and 7.10. Something new here is we will be supporting 64-bit VisualWorks running on Windows for the client. We don't support that today. We have to figure out how to get our DLLs to compile correctly in Windows 64-bit mode, which is harder than you might think. But we're working on that. We have a customer request for that. That will be supported. So if you want to run 64-bit images on Windows, you'll be able to do that. You can do that today on Linux and Solaris. That's known to work. But with Windows, that's new. And yeah. Licensing models, we're widening this out a little bit too. We have the perpetual buy once, own it forever license. We've had that forever. Then before VMware, we used to offer subscription licenses as well. You could sign up every year and do a subscription, and VMware doesn't like subscription licenses, so they made us get rid of that. And we transitioned most of our subscription customers over to perpetuals, some kicking and screaming. But we don't see any reason why we can't have that. So we're bringing that back again. Customers that want subscriptions, we can do that for them, as well as the value-added resellers, our partners. We're refocusing on those as well. Dan showed you the slide of who they are. We're looking to expand the list. Excuse me. Gemstone's free web edition. This is free for commercial use, by the way. The idea is to have a stair step here so customers can start small and you know, when they grow into the next Twitter, pay us a lot of money down the road. Everyone thinks they're going to. We're still waiting for that first one, but it'll happen. We're optimistic. You could start for free and then ramp up to 7,000 a core and then 15,000 a core as the business grows. And we're looking at adding more stair steps into this ramp up as well. I don't think this is quite fine-grained enough. I think there needs to be a few more columns in this chart for ramping up, but this is the general idea. Allows customers to use it commercially and start to make money off it and just kind of, let the license grow with you. That's the intent of this, and we're planning on doing more in this area. On the maglev piece, a lot of you saw Steve's presentation yesterday, and you heard Dan talk about it. Right now, we're in strategic planning for maglev. We're trying to figure out what we do with this thing, how to make money off it, how to not lose money on it, most importantly. It's been on the shelf of VMware now for about 2 years, so it hasn't really got any serious attention from our team very much. There is a project wrapping up at HPI in Germany right now, next month, and we are sending someone over to talk to the students for their project wrap-up and to talk about what we can do with them going forward on maglev and continuing the transition to Ruby 1.9 support, which is where we think we have to get for a minimum viable product. HPI has done some of that work, but not all of it. There's still many months of work to go before we could actually say with a straight face that we're 1.9 compliant in any way, shape, or form. So how do we get there? Do we get there? And then if we do, what do we do with this thing? This is a closed source system. Rubyists tend not to like that. How big a deal is that? There's a lot of questions and not that many answers yet, but our eye is definitely on this ball. We're looking at it pretty hard. We have a planning project underway right now that'll probably go most of the summer to scope this out, figure out what we don't know. So our comment here is really stay tuned on maglev. We're looking at it, but there's a lot going on right now with the transition, and we're pretty distracted for the next few months. But we haven't forgot about it. That's all my slides. Is there any questions? Yeah?
Can you go back to slide 14?
14.
Yeah. So is your last bullet there, is that your version number for your client?
No, I probably have the wrong version number of yours. What should it be?
Actually, I think that is a GBS version number.
That's the GBS version number?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so it is our version number.
So it's like, yeah, so 85186 is probably the correct version there.
My bad.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I work on contract to the Canada Border Services Agency, which you mentioned earlier.
CBSA, yeah.
CBSA. We use Gemstone 32-bit on Windows platforms. And as you can imagine, with government organizations, it's a big effort to get them to switch to something like Linux. So I'm pushing them to do that, but your announcement that you're going to extend the maintenance support for 32-bit is a welcome news for us. One question, we are using Gemstone in conjunction with VA Smalltalk, with GemBuilder Smalltalk, but because we're on 32-bit Gemstone, we're sort of stuck on VA 802, and we're actually anxious to use some of the new features that they have in the newer versions of Visual Age. Is there any way that we could, if there's enough interest by other people, not just for us, but have GemBuilder supported on the latest version of VA Smalltalk under the 32-bit platform, 32-bit Gemstone?
Do you know the answer to that, Martin?
Well, we don't have specific plans in that area right now. I appreciate the feedback, definitely. In the VA GBS clients, we've got a separate series for the 64-bit for the client, the 32-bit clients to the 64-bit server, and the 32-bit clients to the 32-bit server. And you're right, that one hasn't been updated as recently, and therefore doesn't support the most recent VA versions. And that's something we'll be looking at that in planning to see when we want to schedule another update to that series.
I mean, our system is working very well for us. Gemstone is very stable. VA Smalltalk is very stable. But there's so much stuff going into the new versions of VA Smalltalk that we'd love to be able to use. that we can't really switch to until we get our database moved to 64 bits, and that's going to be a long ways away.
Why don't we engage you offline on that? You know, are you working with Robert Lempier?
Yes.
So I talked to Robert, and he'd like us to come up and do a reference architecture. Perhaps you could get involved in that.
I'd like to. Yeah.
He's wants to do a professional services engagement with us and potentially you to look at his complete architecture over the next 2 years and how we do these migrations and how we potentially address some issues like this and a few others. So if we could get you offline, I think we'd be happy to have you involved in that when we head up to Ottawa on our next trip.
He also indicated the government of Canada has recently discovered Linux and is considering moving towards it. Better late than never.
And they've also discovered that when we complain that they will give us access to Linux, but without shell access, that's kind of a problem for us. We can't just dump files somewhere and expect it to run. So,
well, they just found Linux. Can you expect them to find the shell so quickly?
Thank you very much.
It's stuck in customs, yeah. Any more questions for Dan or yes, Suzanne?
Mine is really easy. Before you give your slides to Vanessa, will you update the VA small size version number?
Yes.
Just I think that'll be more beneficial to both you and instantiation.
Yes, absolutely.
It's called VA.
Well, I said VA small size.
Yeah, that's right. Got you that baseball.
That's just coming from Syncom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So speaking of the front-end companies, one last story. When we, in 1994, when I joined, we had a product called Geode. I don't know if any of you remember that. And that was our front-end graphical tool. And I was doing my research, and I go, well, how does that work with distributed, the Digitalk guys and the Park Place team and the VisualWorks team? They go, that competes with them. We're going to take them out. And I go, no, we're not. So we put a bullet in Geode's head, put it off to the side, focused our engineering on the core server, decided to partner with our great partners that we now have today, which I think was a very good decision in retrospect. And the only other decision I made when I joined was to change the name from Servio to Gemstone, because Servio Logic, I didn't quite get it. And I went home to ask my wife, what do you think? She goes, it sounds like an Italian sunglasses company, or maybe even a gynecologist. I don't know why you is it Cervix Logic? What do you got? What do you got going with that name? You got to do something about that. So we checked with all the engineers, and they decided Gemstone, the name of the product, should be the name of the company, and that is the story behind the change of Servio Logic. Anyway, any more questions before we?
Yeah, we got a question from me also. I asked that one from Suzanne. Have you ever had plans to look into Ruby 2.0, which came out in February this year?
It's on the list on the MagLab things to look at. You said Ruby 2.0, right? Yeah, it's part of that whole MagLab exercise we're going through right now. What would we do when in Ruby? So it's been mentioned.
We've been having some good conversations here. Just when we took the company back, we sat down with engineering and said, what do we need to do for the future in some areas? And that was one of the tops. So we've been talking about what's our strategy, and what's the minimum investment required to test the water, and what engineering do we need to do, what internships do we want, what partners do we want, do we spend $100,000 to test the water and engage this market and see where it's going to take us? So if you're already, all those things are going to be part of what flows down from our next couple of months of strategic planning.
Thank you very much.